The auction was over. Every cage was empty, except hers. Until a human whispered, "I'll take her."
Cornvale didn't usually come through the auction square this late, and never on a work day. He didn't like what the place made him feel. The air here always tasted metallic. Filtered, recycled too many times. Too thin to carry scent properly, too thick with heat to breathe easy. Still, it was the quickest way home if he cut behind the collapsed power relay station. A few minutes saved. That was all it was supposed to be. He was 37 years old, a maintenance-grade inventory technician at the East Ridge Atmosphere Plant. Not a soldier, not a rebel, not even anyone with a high enough clearance to pretend he had choices. His job was simple: assign crate contents, log failures, reroute shipments. He'd live alone for 6 years. Woke up, worked, slept, kept his head down, said little. That day had been worse than most. One of the intake conduits had ruptured again, spraying a dozen crates of spare carbon filters with backflow gel. The floor manager, Kessin, had blamed him for rerouting the cargo past deadline. Corin had taken the heat. He always did. He just wanted to get home, shower, maybe eat something warm for once. He carried a tablet, a canister of hydrogel, and a half-crushed ration bar in his pocket. The sun lamps above the rooftops were already dimming into red cycle. He could feel the heat bleeding from the concrete. He turned a corner, walked down the western corridor of the square. Then he saw the cage. Not just the cage, because all the others were empty. Most of them hung open. The doors had been left to swing in place, rusted hinges groaning faintly in a heat-warped breeze that made it through the grid gaps in the overhead canopy. The holding pins lined the corridor like obsolete storage lockers. Chains still bolted into the flooring. Old food trays tossed aside. Some still had stains on the plastic floors, filth, dry blood, ash marks from restraint cuffs gone wrong. A few vendors remained, collecting crates and slapping ID seals to finish off their inventory records. But at the very end of the row, one cage was still locked. No vendor guarded it now. There was no tag hanging on the outer bar. No bid slate, just the sound of quiet breathing. A faint shift of skin on metal. Inside sat a woman. She was motionless, seated with her back against the rear wall of the cage, knees pulled up, one arm loosely draped around them. Her other hand rested on the ground, splayed out for balance. She was barefoot. Her ankles looked swollen, discolored in a way that suggested she'd been bound recently and hard. Her legs were long, muscular under dust and bruises, but held still. Not tense, not slack, just still. Her head tilted forward slightly, as if studying the floor but not in defeat. She didn't tremble. Her silver and gold hair was long, tied roughly behind her neck with what looked like a strip of torn wrap fabric. A few strands had fallen across her cheek. She didn't brush them away. The garment she wore wasn't made for travel or survival. It was ceremonial, traditional, thin silk, probably synthetic, wrapped around her torso in one piece and tied high over one hip, leaving most of her thighs, the slope of her shoulder, and the underside of her breasts exposed. It was torn, filthy in places, water-stained in others. No undergarments. Her ribs showed when she breathed, and yet her spine stayed upright. Her posture wasn't protective. It was deliberate. Corin stopped walking. He didn't mean to. His feet did it before his brain caught up. At first, he didn't know what had caught his attention. Maybe it was that she wasn't crying. She wasn't crouched forward, whispering for mercy like most of the ones who had stood in these cages before. She hadn't even looked at him yet. She sat as if she were waiting for nothing, or had already made peace with something. He hated how familiar that looked. His fingers twitched against the side of his thigh, the sweat from work still drying under his collar. He blinked, swallowed. He stepped closer. Still, she didn't react. Her skin was unlike any he'd seen before. A soft, luminous blue, clean in tone but dulled by layers of dirt and neglect. Underneath, faint tracery lines glowed just under the surface. Not bright, subtle, like shallow biolights reacting to her mood or energy state. He wasn't sure which. He didn't know enough about her kind. She was Allen hybrid, clearly. That much was obvious. The hair, the biolight, the eye shape, the height. Allen women were rare this deep into the colony sectors, and hybrids even more so. He didn't know why she'd been left behind. She was objectively beautiful, even covered in grime and trauma. But he also saw the bruises, the way her knees had small burns, the places on her chest where restraints had rubbed raw. She had not been treated as rare. Then, finally, she looked up. The movement was slow, measured. Their eyes locked. Her gaze wasn't wide with hope or terror. It was tired, controlled. Her eyes were deep golden, almost amber, with darker rings near the edges. She watched him as if he might be the last person she ever saw, but didn't expect anything from him. No appeal, no curiosity, just acknowledgement. A faint shift of her chest as she breathed in, held it, and waited. And without thinking, Korn spoke. "I'll take her." His voice cracked partway through the sentence. Not loud, not forceful, just certain. A vendor nearby looked up from closing a crate. "What?" Korn didn't look away from her. "I said I'll take her." "You sure?" the man said, walking over, wiping his hands on a tarp. "No tag on this one. Late delivery. Wouldn't beg. Didn't even flinch during intake. Most just ignored her. Been sitting there like that for 6 hours. People want pliable." "I don't care what people want," Korn muttered. He pulled out his ident chip, clicked the trade tab, and held it forward. "Just log it." The vendor shrugged. "Up to you, man. But no returns. You get her. She's yours. No swap outs if she snaps. Transaction confirmed." A short tone. The cage door slid open with a dull hydraulic hiss. The woman didn't move. Korn stepped back. "You can come out now." Her eyes stayed on him. She moved after a moment, first shifting her knees forward, then pushing herself upright using her thigh for leverage. No stumbles. No trembling. Her ceremonial wrap dipped further across her chest when she stood, revealing the curve of one breast almost entirely. She didn't pull it up, didn't adjust anything. She walked out of the cage barefoot, her hair brushing the tops of her arms. He didn't offer a hand, didn't touch her. She didn't ask for anything. They walked side by side through the old auction square, past the crates, past the tarps, past vendors who barely looked up. The air outside the canopy was cooler now, wind pushing through the side alleys. Korn kept his pace steady. Her footsteps were quiet, more controlled than he expected. He kept thinking, what am I doing? He had no answer, only the growing awareness that something inside his chest had shifted the moment she looked at him. His apartment was small, just one room, divided into a kitchenette, a bed, and a floor mat. No luxuries, no AI assistant, just recycled air, patched insulation, a sink that sputtered sometimes. He opened the door with a palm scan and stepped inside. She followed, glancing around once. He gestured to the clean mat by the far wall. "You can rest there. I'll get you food." She nodded once, then walked over and sat, cross-legged, spine still straight. Korn went to the kitchen, heated nutrient broth, left it near her. She didn't touch it right away. She looked at him, expression neutral, gaze steady. Neither spoke. And in the stillness of that narrow apartment, Korn Vale realized he hadn't just taken her in to save someone. He had taken her in because something in him had already broken, and she hadn't asked him to fix her. The broth sat untouched on the floor near her knee, steam curling faintly toward the low ceiling. The overhead light in the apartment buzzed, flickered once, then stabilized. Korn stood by the counter, leaning slightly against the edge, arms crossed, watching her in silence. He wasn't sure what he expected, gratitude, exhaustion, fear maybe. But she just sat on the mat with her knees tucked close, not hunched, not defensive. Just still. He hadn't asked her name. He wasn't sure if he should. She hadn't offered it. And something about the silence between them felt deliberate, not forced. She had chosen not to speak. That mattered. Korn shifted his weight, then walked over and knelt beside the food tray. He pushed it slightly closer. "It's hot nutrient broth," he said. "Synthetic protein, filtered water. Not much flavor, but it's clean. I boiled it." She looked down at it, then up at him. No nod, no thanks. But she reached for the cup. Her fingers moved slowly, the grip slightly stiff. He saw the way her hands hesitated, as if expecting something to be taken from her. Then she lifted it and drank. Her throat moved slowly, controlled. When she finished, she set the cup back down without a word. He exhaled quietly. In the silence that followed, Corin sat down on the edge of his small bench. Not the bed, just a metal-framed sitting seat near the charging port. He glanced at her again. Her skin looked cleaner in the warm light, less pale, more vibrant under the faint glow of her internal markings. The bruises stood out too, some older, some recent. There was a line under her right rib. He couldn't tell if it was a burn or a cuff mark. "I'm not going to touch you," he said quietly. Her eyes didn't flicker. "I didn't take you for that," he added, unsure of his own phrasing. "I didn't buy you. There wasn't a price. It was just you were still there." She blinked once, slowly, and I couldn't keep walking. He didn't know why he said that. Maybe it was for her. Maybe it was for himself. He hadn't meant to stop. He didn't even know what he was doing there. But something about her silence, her refusal to act broken, had cut through the noise in his mind. That noise never stopped. Not at work. Not in the tunnels. Not even when he slept. She was still watching him. Studying. Not evaluating. More like listening with her eyes. Measuring the shape of him. Deciding what kind of man he was. And if the silence was safe to keep. Then she did something he didn't expect. She reached to one side and adjusted her wrap, just slightly. Covered her thigh. Not entirely. Not out of modesty. Just deliberate. Like she'd finally decided to draw a boundary. Corin looked away. "I have work tomorrow," he said. "I leave early. You can stay here. No one checks this unit." Still nothing. He stood and moved toward the closet. Pulled out a folded blanket. It was thin, made of synth thread and carbon mesh, but it was clean. He sat down on the floor beside her. "I don't know what you need yet, but if you stay, you don't owe me anything. Not food, not warmth, not words." She looked down at the blanket, then up at him. Her lips parted for the first time. "Why?" The word was hoarse, rough from disuse, barely a whisper. Corin froze. He turned, slowly, then sat again, this time on the floor, not far from her but not too close. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe I'm tired of watching people pass each other like trash. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe you looked like you weren't going to beg and I..." He stopped. She stared at him, eyes steady. Corin rubbed his jaw, then let his arms fall to his sides. "I didn't do it to be good. I didn't do it for anything. I just saw you, and it felt wrong to leave you there." She leaned back slightly, resting on one palm. Her breathing was still even. "Calm." She didn't ask another question. Corin stood again. "I'll sleep on the bench. If you need anything, the water's filtered. I don't lock anything. There's a med strip pack in the drawer near the sink." He dimmed the light to half and stepped toward the corner bench where he usually read during maintenance downtimes. It wasn't comfortable. It didn't matter. He lay back, arms crossed over his chest, stared at the low, cracked ceiling. He thought about what his co-worker Ivan would say. Probably nothing kind. Probably a smirk. "Brought home a cage girl?" Or worse, "That why you're so quiet lately?" He pushed the thoughts out. Sleep didn't come easy. Not with someone else breathing in the room. But she didn't move. Hours passed. Then, sometime during the red shift hours, he felt the air shift. Not noise, just the presence of motion. He opened his eyes. She stood near the wall, wrapped loosely, arms around herself, blanket draped across her back. Her feet were silent on the floor. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring out the narrow slit window at the towers in the distance. Their warning lights blinked red against the haze. Her posture was still upright, her face unreadable. He didn't speak. She turned her head slightly, met his gaze over her shoulder. "I'm Arius," she said. Then she lay back down on the mat and pulled the blanket over her body. And for the first time in years, Corin felt something shift in his chest. Not relief, not victory, just an unfamiliar warmth. He said nothing, but he knew the silence between them had changed. And tomorrow, he would learn what it meant to let someone stay. Not because they were owned, but because they chose not to leave. The next morning arrived quietly. No alarm, no chimes, just a soft change in light as the building's outer panels cycled from night filter red to the pale, desaturated glow of local sunrise. The first to stir wasn't Corin. Arius sat up slowly, already awake. Her legs unfolded one at a time, careful, methodical, as if checking each joint before moving. Her wrap had shifted during the night, now resting just above her hip, chest still modestly covered by the blanket. Her long silver gold hair had fallen over one shoulder, and she pushed it back without thought. She didn't look toward Corin at first. He was asleep on the bench, arms crossed tight, jaw clenched even in rest. He hadn't removed his boots. She looked around the room again, more thoroughly this time. She noticed the little details she'd ignored last night. The patchy tape on the corner conduit, the half-broken air intake vent above the sink, the single shelf with 3 data cards and 1 folded photo placed face down. There were no personal touches, no ornaments, just function. Arius stood and walked barefoot to the small wash station. She ran the water. It came out slow, inconsistent in temperature, but clean. She splashed some onto her face, then cupped her hands and drank. When she looked up, she saw her reflection in the metal panel above the faucet, dull and warped, but enough. Her skin was blotched with old marks, one eye slightly swollen. She looked not worse than usual, but not better either. Behind her, Corin stirred. She turned before he opened his eyes. Watch him wake up, slow, blinking against the light, not sure where he was for a second. Then he saw her standing there, the blanket still draped over her shoulders, her body visible through the wrap in thin silhouette. He sat up, rubbed his face. "I didn't think you'd still be here," he said, voice scratchy with sleep. "I said I was staying," Arius replied. Corin nodded. He wasn't sure if that was confirmation or a warning. He stood, stretched slightly, then walked to the sink and gestured for her to move aside. She did. He filled a mug from the side tap, sipped, then turned and leaned against the counter. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I'm used to not being." "That's not what I asked." She held his gaze for a second, then nodded. He nodded back and moved to the small cooking unit, opened a canister of thick paste, and mixed it with boiled starch from a dried packet. He wasn't good at this. He wasn't used to anyone watching him prepare food. She sat back down on the floor mat. "I don't need your bed," she said plainly. "I didn't offer it." She looked up, almost surprised at his answer. He paused. "But if you want it, take it." "I don't care." "I don't want it," she said. "All right." The silence returned. Not sharp, just unfamiliar. When the food was ready, he handed her the bowl. She took it without a word and began to eat, small bites, chewing carefully. Corin ate from his own bowl while sitting on the bench. Occasionally, their eyes met. After a while, she spoke again. "You haven't asked me where I came from." Corin swallowed, then looked at her. "I figured if you wanted me to know, you'd say." Arius nodded slightly. "I was part of a transport unit. Not military. Not bonded. Our station was flagged as non-functional. We were sold as deadweight. They offloaded us mid-route to clear cargo weight. The crew knew. They didn't care." Corin frowned. "And they put you in a cage. No one asked my name." He nodded slowly. "That's how they get away with it. They didn't even hit me much. I think they wanted me to look clean. Or maybe I wasn't worth it." He didn't respond. She added, "I never begged. That was the only choice I kept. That's why I stopped," Corin said quietly. For the first time, she looked at him with something other than wariness. "What are you?" she asked. "What?" "You're not military. Not sector police. You're not rich. You don't even have a voice assistant." Corin exhaled. "I do inventory control for atmospheric maintenance. I log cargo, assign crates. Sometimes I scrub systems. Sometimes I carry broken parts from one end of the intake docks to the other. No clearance. No contacts. Just a name on a shift rotation list." "Then why do you live alone?" He hesitated. "Because I got tired of people needing something from me and never staying once they got it." Arius set her bowl down. "That's the first thing you've said that makes sense." He looked up sharply. She wasn't mocking him. She sounded aligned, like she understood. It landed heavy in the space between them. Later that day, he left for work. Before he did, he gave her access to the manual lock on the door. "You can leave anytime. I won't stop you. I know. I'll be back by cycle shift 3. I won't eat your food unless I need to. You can eat what you want." He paused before exiting. She looked at him with her arms crossed. "I'll be here," she said. That evening, when he returned, the apartment smelled faintly of heat-treated rations and steam. Arius had washed her hair. The torn wrap had been retied more neatly. The floor was clean. She didn't say anything when he entered, but she had made space for him to sit. It wasn't trust yet, but it wasn't silence anymore either. The weather outside had turned colder. Not sharply, but enough that the apartment's recycled air carried a chill whenever the circulation fans paused. Core noticed it as he stepped through the doorway after shift. His boots were dusted with dry grit. The ends of his sleeves were damp from coolant spray. He closed the door behind him, rubbed his hands together, and looked up. Arius was standing by the stove. She had lit the single burner, the smallest one, and was warming a sealed ration pack over a metal plate. Her back was straight, hair still wet. Thick silver strands slicked down her spine, leaving a damp patch across the wrap at her lower back. She had cleaned again. The floor gleamed faintly. The sink had been drained. The air smelled of heated protein paste and something herbal, probably the last of the packet tea he had forgotten in the cabinet. She turned her head when she heard him. Didn't speak, just watched. Corin set his bag down and pulled off his jacket. He hesitated, watching her from the corner of his eye. "How long have you been standing?" he asked. "An hour." "You didn't have to." "I know." He stepped closer to the sink, opened the side drawer, and pulled out a second cup. She poured the hot liquid from the kettle without waiting for him to ask. It wasn't a serving gesture. It was practical, unceremonious. She handed it over, and their fingers nearly touched. Corin's hand jerked slightly, reflex. She didn't flinch. Her skin was warmer than expected. He took a sip. She resumed stirring the ration pack. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then softly she asked, "Do you always eat alone?" Corin exhaled slowly. "Usually." She nodded. "I didn't eat when I lived in the station dorms. Just ration bars. Quick ones. That was before the transport unit." She looked over her shoulder. "That was the transport unit. I was assigned there at 17. Internal logistics. I was supposed to stay until bonding age, but they never processed my papers." Corin leaned back against the counter. "So you were never claimed?" "I was never named," she corrected quietly. "Not officially." He studied her face as she stirred. Her profile was calm, focused, but her jaw tightened slightly when she spoke. "Did you try to leave?" She turned slowly to face him, bowl now warm in her hands. "There's nowhere to go if you don't exist on a manifest." Corin nodded. He understood that too well. She moved past him, brushing his arm. Not roughly, just barely. On her way to the bench where she sat with her knees drawn halfway up, eating. Her shoulder had touched his sleeve for only a second, but it lingered in his chest longer than it should have. He wasn't used to people being near him without flinching or bracing. "You work a lot," she said between slow bites. "Don't have much reason not to." "Is that what this is?" she asked, not looking up. "A reason?" He didn't answer right away. He sat down on the edge of the bed across from her and rubbed his temple. "I don't know what this is." She kept eating. Then she said, evenly, "You think I'll sleep with you?" Corin's breath caught, not from offense, but because she had said it so plainly. "No," he said, his voice tighter than before. "I think you've been hurt enough without having to guess my intentions." Arius stared at him. Her gold eyes flickered with something unreadable. "That's why I sat here tonight," she said. "I wanted to see if you'd ask." He met her gaze. "Would it change anything if I did?" "Yes." "Ow, I'd leave." He nodded, slowly. He didn't speak for a while. Then he got up, crossed the room, and poured the last of the tea into his cup. "You can do what you want," he said without looking at her. "Stay, eat, talk, or don't." As he turned to walk back, she was standing now, closer than before, just a few steps from the edge of the kitchen. "Then I'll stay," she said softly. He stopped. "I'll stay tonight," she added, "and I'll sit closer. Not because I owe you, but because I want to see what it feels like not being afraid of you." Corin swallowed. Her voice hadn't wavered. Her arms were still crossed, but not in defense. She was cold. Her shoulders shook slightly under the wrap, but she didn't step back. He reached behind him, pulled the blanket from the chair, and handed it to her. Not over her shoulders, just held it out, flat, like a choice. She took it. That night, she didn't return to the mat. She sat beside him on the edge of the bed, back to back, blankets shared between them, both staring out the window at nothing. Not a word more was said, but something irreversible had happened. The distance was closing, and neither of them moved to stop it. They moved around each other now, without hesitation. Not perfectly, not yet without awkwardness, but the fear that once stretched between them had thinned into something quieter, almost soft. It was the small things that changed first. When Corin came home that night, the lights were already dimmed to his preferred setting. The heater, finicky at best, had been coaxed into life with careful adjustments to the power node, which he hadn't had the time to fix for months. The air no longer carried that stale aftertaste of recycled metal. Arius stood by the window again, draped in the same ceremonial wrap, but tonight a second layer. A plain work shirt from his closet hung loosely over her shoulders. It was too large. It reached past her hips. She hadn't buttoned it. She hadn't needed to. "You fixed the heater," he said, setting his satchel down. "I watched you work on it last week. You didn't calibrate the fuse grid. You learned fast. I observe. That's not the same as trust." He removed his boots slowly. She didn't turn around, just kept watching the lights outside, where distant cargo haulers blinked red and white as they crawled past the skyline. He walked toward the kitchenette. "I've got 2 scent fish packets left. Might still be edible." "Heat it," she said. "I'll eat with you." He glanced at her then, not expecting the way her voice landed. Direct, almost warm, not as sharp as before. They sat together at the bench this time. Not across, not on the floor. Her thigh brushed his. She didn't shift away. She ate slowly, and when she finished, she slid her bowl halfway onto his tray in a quiet rhythm that almost felt practiced. He reached for it without comment. "Wash both." Arius moved to the bed while he cleaned. Not lying down, just sitting, arms crossed over her knees. The blanket draped over her back. Corin dried his hands. Turned. "You can sleep if you're tired," he offered. "I'm not tired." He stayed where he was. "Do you want the room to yourself?" "No." She looked at him, and something shifted. It wasn't sudden, but it was definite. She reached out with one hand and touched the edge of his sleeve, barely a fingertip, a moment's pressure, and then let it go. Her face remained neutral. No smile, no tension, just a test. A quiet statement. "I don't fear this." Corin's chest tightened, but he didn't move. She looked down at her lap. "Today I thought about leaving," she said. "Just going out. Not far. Just to feel if I could." "You can," he said steady. "I didn't." "Why not?" She paused. "Because the silence out there feels heavier than the silence in here." He sat beside her, not close enough to touch, but not far. She adjusted the blanket, then slowly leaned into his side. Her head came to rest just below his shoulder. Her hair still smelled faintly of soap and city air. His muscles locked. She felt it. "Is this wrong?" she asked quietly. "No," he said. "It just has been a long time." She nodded once against his chest. He didn't move, didn't place a hand on her, but he didn't stop her either. Minutes passed like that. The room was silent except for the low hum of the wall unit. Then she said something he hadn't expected. "Touch my back." Just once. Corin hesitated. "I don't want sex," she added, still quiet. "I just want to feel someone's hand without a reason behind it." He moved slowly, placed one hand gently between her shoulder blades, felt her skin warm through the fabric. He didn't stroke. He didn't press. Just stayed there. Arius exhaled. Her shoulders relaxed. That night, she slept on the bed. He didn't. But in the early morning hours, when the air turned colder and the heater cut out again, she reached across the sheets, found his hand, and held it in her sleep. Neither of them spoke. Neither let go. The next few days passed without rhythm, but not without meaning. Arius stayed. She didn't say it directly. She didn't need to. It was in the way she rearranged the shelves above the sink, folded the extra blanket and tucked it under the bench, or reprogrammed the wall panel to cycle the air filters earlier in the morning so Corin wouldn't cough when he woke. She never asked for permission. She simply acted like the space was hers too. And Corin let her. He returned from work on the 4th evening to find her drying her hair in the corner, seated on a folded towel near the heating duct. The wash basin was still dripping. She'd used the shower, which surprised him. Not because she hadn't before, but because this time she'd left the door open after. She wore his second shirt again, this time buttoned halfway, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. Her wrap was gone, folded neatly on the heater grill to dry. Her bare legs were crossed, clean, marked only by fading bruises now. Her skin was smoother, the glow beneath it stronger. She looked up when he entered. "You always take your boots off like someone's chasing you," she said. He smirked. "That's the job. You move too slow, someone else takes the shift." She studied him as he shrugged off his jacket, her gaze lingering a second longer than usual. "You work too much. Pays for the food. And the heat. We barely use either." He paused. "You hungry?" She shook her head. "No. Sit." Corin hesitated, then did as she asked. Sat beside her on the warm floor, back against the same wall. The heater buzzed gently nearby. The silence was easy now, comfortable, familiar. Then she spoke, soft but direct. "Do you want me here?" He turned slightly to look at her. "You already know the answer. I want to hear it." He nodded, voice quiet. "Yes." Arius looked down at her hands, then turned them over, palms up. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be now. I'm not a transport crew. I'm not property. I don't know if I'm partner, guest, or just someone waiting for the next exit." "You're not property," he said, "and I don't want a guest." "Then what am I?" Corin thought for a long moment before answering. "You're someone I'd miss if you weren't here." Arius didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped. Some invisible pressure released. She reached over and touched his forearm, lightly at first, then with more certainty. Her fingers traced the seam of his sleeve. She didn't look up. "I don't need to be saved," she whispered. "I'm not here to save you," he replied. "Then why do you keep making space for me?" "Because I want you to choose to stay." She leaned in then, slow and close, until her forehead rested against his jaw. Her breath was warm, her skin still damp from the wash. Corin didn't move. His hand hovered near hers, but he didn't grip her back. "You haven't asked me for anything," she said. "I won't. What if I want to offer something?" Corin's voice stayed even. "Only if it's what you want. Not because you think it's payment." She tilted her head up slightly. "Would you still want me if I stopped offering anything?" "I want you if you just stayed and let the silence be ours." That made her pause. Then she leaned in further, curling against his side, one leg stretching over his thigh. Her shirt slipped slightly at the collar. She didn't fix it. Her cheek pressed to his neck. Her hand slid under his arm, settling at his ribs. And for the first time, she said it with no fear, no hesitation. "I want to stay, Corin. I want to stay because here, I feel like I belong to myself again." He placed his hand over hers. Not to claim, not to hold, just to meet her there. That night, she pulled him to the bed. Not for sex, not yet, but for warmth. For the press of skin against skin. For the breathing that aligned naturally when trust finally took root. They lay under the same blanket, her chest against his back, her hand at his waist. And when the room dimmed fully and the outer lights blinked to sleep mode, neither of them moved away. Tomorrow wouldn't bring threats. Only the question they both knew would come next. Were we now? If we're no longer broken? That answer would come. But not tonight. Tonight, they slept together. The apartment was still dim when Corin opened his eyes. No alarms. No work scheduled today. Just the filtered morning light bleeding in through the thin upper window, washing the walls in pale amber. His body ached faintly, not from discomfort, but from the unfamiliar weight of someone sleeping beside him. Arius was curled against him, her breath slow, arm draped over his waist beneath the blanket. The shirt she wore was unbuttoned halfway now, exposing the slope of her shoulder and part of her chest where her skin warmed his side. Her legs were folded loosely with his. Her body wasn't tense. She wasn't afraid. She hadn't been all night. Corin didn't move. He just listened to the sound of her breathing, to the silence of the building around them, to the faint hum of air filters running a clean cycle. For the first time in years, there was nothing in him trying to leave the room. He gently turned to face her. She stirred. Her golden eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. For a moment, she just stared at him. No expression, no guarded mask, just the raw, tired clarity of someone waking up in safety. Then, softly, her fingers curled against his chest. "You didn't leave the bed," she said. "No. Why?" He took a breath before answering. "Because you didn't ask me to." She nodded once, then shifted higher, resting her forehead against his. Her voice was steady. "Corin, I'm not leaving." He let that settle. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel like a line said in exchange for food or warmth. It felt final. A decision she had made without fear or need. A choice. "I know," he said. "I thought I'd never say that. I thought if I stayed anywhere too long, I'd forget who I was." "And have you?" She leaned back slightly and studied him. "No, I think I finally remembered." He ran a hand along the side of her neck. Slowly, not possessive, just grounded, present. "You don't have to call it anything," he said. "Not relationship, not bond, not contract." She smiled faintly, barely visible. "Good, because I don't want a label. I want this. You, me, whatever this becomes, I want it on my terms." He kissed her forehead. Light, quiet, and she let herself fall forward, pressing in his chest, arms sliding around his back, legs curling tighter with his under the blanket. He held her, not to keep her, just to let her feel how solid he was. How real. Hours passed. They stayed in bed long after the morning cycle ended. No one knocked. No work calls. No fear. Later, she helped cook. She used her hands. He let her take the lead. She spilled spice paste on the counter and laughed under her breath. He didn't know what surprised him more, that she laughed or that he did too. That afternoon, they sat on the bench together, watching the air ducts pulse with soft blue light. Arius wore one of his old shirts, tied at the waist now, and nothing underneath. She rested against him with a kind of ease that hadn't existed days ago. She asked, "Do you still want me even now?" He looked at her. "You never had to ask." She nodded. "Then let me stay. Not as the woman from the cage. Not as someone broken. Just as me." And Corin, quiet, practical, unspectacular Corin, reached for her hand and held it tightly. "Stay as long as it takes," he said. "This time, no one gets sold. No one gets thrown away. We're done with that." She pressed her forehead to his. And just like that, the story ended. No rescue. No running. Just two people quietly choosing each other. For good. It had been weeks since she first stayed. The light came in soft that morning. Not golden. Not cold. Just still. Corin stood at the counter, stirring a pan of porridge with one hand, sipping tea from a worn cup with the other. The air smelled faintly of citrus, the last dried fruit ration they'd cut open last night, and of her skin, still damp from her shower. He didn't need to check the time anymore. Their rhythm didn't require a clock. Arius came out of the washroom barefoot, her steps light. She wore a sleeveless tunic now, one she had sewn herself from scraps, fitted gently over her body, looser around the waist than usual. Her silver gold hair was tied back, still dripping slightly at the tips. She dried it with a towel in slow movements. He turned when he felt her watching. "You look pale," he said. "I feel strange," she replied. His eyes narrowed. Not worried, just attentive. "Pain." She shook her head. "No, just wait. Like something's happening in me." She didn't sit. She stepped forward instead, until her hand reached his, gently taking the spoon from his fingers. She placed it down, then turned off the stove. The quiet of the room settled around them. "I've felt it for 3 days," she said. "I thought it was stress." Corin watched her carefully. She didn't flinch under his gaze. She lifted his hand, slowly, deliberately, and pressed it flat against her lower stomach. They both stood still. No words. Her eyes searched his, waiting for resistance. He gave her none. He left his palm there. Warm, open, solid. "You're sure?" he asked quietly. She nodded once. "I don't know what I want to call it," she said. "It's not a victory. It's not a punishment. It's not something to fix me." He nodded. "But I don't feel afraid," she added. "Not anymore." His thumb moved slightly across her skin, slow and grounding. "And you don't have to stay because of this," she said. "I'll never ask. I stayed before I knew," he replied. Arius closed her eyes, let her forehead rest against his chest. Her breathing deepened, body relaxing. For once, he felt the exact moment her guard dropped. No tension, no hidden strength. Just Arius, as she was, as she chose to be. They stood there a long time. No rush, no crisis, no announcements. Later that day, they took the transit rail to the outskirts. The city edge was quiet, industrial zones fading into green infrastructure. Distant towers stood unfinished. Wind turbines turned lazily under a gray sky. They didn't speak much during the ride, just sat together, her head on his shoulder, his hand on her knee. The silence between them no longer meant distance. It was home. They got off at a station no one used, walked along a raised path surrounded by dust and sky. She took slow steps. He matched her pace. Eventually, they stopped beneath a tall power frame, long abandoned, where vines grew through metal and small birds nested in the open joints. Arius reached up, touched a broken pipe, and looked out at the horizon. Then she turned to him. "You said I never had to be anything." "You still don't," he said. "But I think I want to be something now. Just for us." He nodded. They sat on the slope together, backs against the steel base. He took off his jacket and gave it to her. She draped it over her legs, hands pressed lightly to her belly. And when the sun began to break through the clouds, lighting the skyline in a dull golden wash, she spoke one final time. "Whatever happens after this, it won't come from fear." Corin wrapped his arm around her, pulled her in. "No, it'll come from here," he said, resting her hand over his chest. She smiled, eyes calm. And just like that, without ceremony, without noise, the story was over. She was free. He was not alone. And between them, something new had already begun. The end.